So today we're going to look at what is American imperialism and what does it look like at its beginning. So imperialism is going to start with European countries expanding territories in Asia and Africa. If you took world history, you'll know about like the scramble for Africa and European countries' influence in Asia kind of taking over these different continents. The United States and Japan are seeing all of this happen, and they begin to consider their own options and how they can expand their influence and claim land outside of their own countries as well. There's going to be three big reasons for why different countries want to imperialize. The first is economic benefits. We have something called extractive economies. Extractive economies are where a powerful country goes to another country, takes resources, raw materials, and sends it back to their home country. This is a big motivation for European countries because they are very limited on the resources they have in Europe. There's a finite amount of land. Their populations have expanded to take over a lot of that land. There's not a lot of resources left. So they're going to look to other countries, other continents. This is not a big motivator for the United States, however. The US has a lot of resources available, especially with westward expansion. So they're not motivated by the raw materials that they can get in other countries. Instead, they are more motivated by the economic markets that they can tap into if they imperialize. If they take over other countries, they can sell US products to those local people. So the United States is producing, at this time, it's going to be producing more products than the United States can consume. So they need people to buy their products. So if they take over another country, they can tell that country they can only buy from American companies, allowing US markets to expand and those companies to profit even more. The second motivation, especially for the United States, is going to be this idea of military strength. In class, we read about Alfred T. Mahan. He's going to be a big influencer on the U.S. expansion in regard to its military. Mahan believes that strong countries need strong navies. Looking back at historical examples, he points out that a lot of the most powerful countries throughout history had powerful armies, specifically powerful navies. So he's going to encourage the United States to build a modern fleet, use the Industrial Revolution, expand the weapons and the ships that the US Navy can have. He is going to call for imperialism because he wants land for military bases. If the US takes over different islands, different ports around the world, the US Navy can then travel around the globe, having spots to stop to refuel and gather fresh supplies for the Navy. Through his encouragement and his influence, by 1900, the United States is going to have the third largest Navy in the world. The third motivation is going to be this sense of superiority, this idea of racial superiority and national superiority. This is going to be a motivator for European and American pro-imperialists. There's this idea of social Darwinism. There's this belief that certain nations and races are naturally superior to others, thus destined to take over inferior places and inferior peoples. So people are going to justify taking over another place, invading and forcing a local population to under US control, and use that social Darwinism as a way to justify this action, saying we are superior, we deserve this, and are destined to take over other places. This idea is going to be kind of an extension of manifest destiny. Instead of it being our destiny, America's destiny, to expand west and take over the entire, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. There's this shifting belief that it is our destiny to take over other countries and expand American ideals abroad. What does that look like? Well, initial imperialism and imperialization is going to happen in the mid 1800s. So we're jumping back a little bit in history from where we left off. In 1853, so before the Civil War, we see our first action of U.S. imperialism with this guy named Commodore Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry is going to set his sights over into the Pacific, specifically on Japan. At this point in time in history, Japan has self-isolated. They have cut off any connection with the outside world, focusing in on their own country. They did not allow any foreign countries to come to their ports to trade. They completely cut off all ties. Well, in 1853, Commodore Perry is going to sail a U.S. fleet with steamships into Tokyo Bay, Japan. This is the first time a lot of Japanese have even seen a steamship. So they're not sure what it is. It is much more advanced than the technology and the ships that they had at that point in time. Because of these differences in Perry's negotiations, he is going to negotiate a treaty, the first treaty any outside country has had with Japan for quite a while. So they're going to open up trade relationships between the United States and Japan. Japan is going to take advantage of this because they realize their isolation caused them to fall behind other countries greatly. So they want to get caught up. So they're going to open up at least trade with one country, the US, to start to begin to catch up technologically. A little bit later, in 1867, we are going to see the US kind of expand north to Alaska. I'm going to skip forward for a second for a map. So we're going to look up into this area. So some of you might have wondered why there's this huge gap between the lower 48, mainland United States, and Alaska. And it's going to be because of this guy, Secretary of State William Seward. Seward is going to buy Alaska from Russia in 1867 for $7.2 million. Initially, people see this as such a bad idea. Journalists are going to call Alaska Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox, because at this point, most Americans only saw it as this icy wasteland that Russia was just trying to get rid of. But over time, as more Americans go up and start exploring in Alaska, they realize that it's rich with natural resources of timber. Later on, we find oil. Later on, after that, we find gold. So all of these natural resources are going to be in the benefit of the United States. Alaska is going to help double the size of the United States. And later on, it's going to allow the United States to reach across the Pacific and help expand their influence with how far Alaska reaches, allowing more naval travel to happen. Oops. The last early imperialistic action we see deals with Hawaii. So early U.S.-Hawaiian relations are going to exist since the 1790s. Since the 1790s, United States ships are going to stop in Hawaii as kind of just a resupply point on their way over to Asia in the trade markets that they have over there. U.S. missionaries also established churches and a lot of schools in Hawaii since the 1790s. And most importantly for what we're talking about today, the United States has a lot of planters who are going to establish sugar plantations, so leave what was then the United States and kind of travel abroad over to Hawaii and set up sugar plantations. In 1887, U.S. planters are going to convince the King of Hawaii King Kalakaua to give voting rights only to wealthy landowners. Well, at that point in time, wealthy landowners are going to be white planters from the United States. So essentially, the people who have any political power in Hawaii are going to be white planters from the United States. In the 1890s, things start to shift. So the planters were pretty confident, feeling really strong. But in the 1890s, the United States is going to raise the cost of sugar outside of the US. So Hawaiian sugar is going to become more and more expensive. So Hawaiian planters worry about their profits. In 1891, there's also going to be another problem that causes tension with the Hawaiian planters. The king is going to die, and his sister, Liliuokalani, is going to take over. Queen Liliuokalani resented the white landowners taking advantage and taking power away from Native Hawaiians. So early on, she is going to abolish the Constitution, taking away limited voting rights that were only for white plantation owners. And so she's going to take a lot of power away. So the U.S. planters are really going to resent that. And in 1893, the white planters, backed by the U.S. military, are going to overthrow the Hawaiian queen, and they replace her with their own government led by white planters. So the white planters, the U.S. planters, solve one problem, getting rid of the queen who was trying to take power back away from them. But they still need to solve the market problem that they're facing. So these planters are now going to turn to the U.S. government and ask them to annex the islands, to take it in as a U.S. territory. In 1898, the president is able to get enough congressional support to annex the island. So in 1898, Hawaii is going to become a U.S. territory. So these are just kind of the early U.S. imperialistic actions. We'll talk more about how the U.S. is going to become a major imperialist power and how it's going to expand much, much further than in the Western Hemisphere. We'll talk more about that later. Go ahead and answer questions and have a great night, guys.